It was my 30th birthday, and I thought it would be just like any other celebration, surrounded by family and friends, full of love and laughter. But as the evening went on, my mother pulled me aside and said something that changed everything. "You need to know this," she said. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my childhood, my family, and even myself was thrown into question. What she revealed completely altered my understanding of the past, and it's a truth I never expected to hear. The day started off like any other birthday celebration. I had planned this party for weeks, and everything was falling into place. My family was there, friends from all over. The atmosphere was warm, and the laughter was endless. My mom, my dad, my younger brother Chris, and my best friend Sarah were all present, and I couldn't have been more excited. Turning 30 felt like a milestone, a fresh start. I had a great career, wonderful friends, and I was looking forward to what the next decade of my life would bring. The restaurant was decorated with balloons and candles, and as the evening went on, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. There was so much love around me, and it felt like the perfect celebration of everything I had worked for. My mom and dad were there, looking so proud, and it felt like the picture of the family I had always cherished. For me, the night felt like everything was coming full circle. I had reached a point in life where I could truly appreciate the family I had, the relationships I'd built, and the people who supported me. But even as I sat there, surrounded by all the joy, I couldn't shake the thought that something was off. It wasn't anything I could pinpoint at first. Maybe it was just the overwhelming feeling of turning 30, or perhaps it was because I had been so busy with everything lately that I hadn't fully taken in the moment. Whatever it was, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was about to change. As the evening continued, I felt the weight of my family's expectations, particularly from my mom. She'd always been my biggest cheerleader, but I knew there was something more, a certain look in her eyes, a kind of intensity I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't unusual for her to pull me aside at events to share a quiet moment, but this time felt different. I didn't know why, but I could sense that she was about to say something important, something I wasn't prepared for. After the cake was cut and everyone had enjoyed their slice, my mom suggested we step outside for a moment. I agreed, thinking it was just for a breather, a chance to catch up in a quieter setting. But as soon as we stepped out into the cool night air, she looked at me with a seriousness in her eyes I had never seen before. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt that uneasy feeling grow stronger. What was happening? Why was this conversation different from the countless others we had shared? "Emma," she began, her voice shaking just slightly. "There's something you need to know about your childhood, something I've never told you before." I froze. The calm, warm night suddenly felt like it was closing in on me, and I had no idea what was coming next. Whatever it was, it couldn't be good. I tried to hide my anxiety, giving her a reassuring smile, but inside, I was already panicking. Was she about to tell me something about my father, or something I'd missed growing up? I had no idea, but the suspense was killing me. It was my birthday, the day I thought was about celebrating the good things in my life. But now, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. I braced myself, waiting for her to continue. What could possibly be so important that it couldn't wait for another day? As my mom began speaking, the weight of her words hit me like a tidal wave, and for the first time that evening, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She took a deep breath before continuing, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It wasn't sadness or regret, but something much heavier, something that felt like years of unspoken secrets were about to pour out of her all at once. "Emma," she started again, her voice quiet but firm, "you've always believed that our family had it all figured out, that we were perfect, and that everything was as it seemed. But there's something I need to tell you, something that might change how you see everything." I could feel the ground shift beneath me, and my mind raced, trying to process what was coming. I had always seen my parents as the rock-solid foundation of my life. I never questioned their love for each other, for us. Our family had always been a safe place for me. My father, a quiet, reliable man, and my mother, the steady force that held everything together. This was the picture I had painted of my childhood, a picture that had never been challenged. But now, with my mother standing in front of me, her eyes filled with something that resembled guilt, I couldn't help but feel a shift, a crack in the perfect image I had always believed in. I never wanted to hurt you by keeping this from you, but I've carried this secret for so long, she said, her voice faltering for a moment. There were things happening when you were younger, things you weren't aware of, that changed everything, and it's time you knew the truth. Her words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning, and I felt my heart begin to race. What could she be talking about? I had never been aware of any serious issues between my parents. Sure, they had their occasional arguments, as most couples do, but nothing that suggested the foundation of our family was built on anything but love and stability. What was she about to say that could unravel everything? She took a step closer, and I noticed her hands trembling slightly. My mind was spinning as I tried to brace myself for whatever came next. Your father and I weren't always as happy as you thought, she continued, her words slow and deliberate. There were struggles, things we kept hidden from you, things about your father's past. I didn't want to tell you before, but now I see that you're old enough to understand. I could feel the ground beneath me grow colder, more unstable. What did she mean? What kind of past could my father have had that would change the way I saw my entire childhood? She paused again, this time to collect herself before she said, Your father, he wasn't always the man you think he was. Before he met me, he had a life full of mistakes, bad choices, and things he's never shared with you. And when we got married, we both agreed that it was best for you to never know. We wanted to protect you from the truth. Her words crashed over me, and for the first time in my life, I felt like the ground beneath me was being pulled away. My father, the man I had always looked up to, the man I had trusted without question, had secrets, dark ones. What could these secrets be? What kind of mistakes had he made? Why had my mother kept this from me for so long? I felt as though the room was closing in on me, and my heart pounded in my chest. My whole life, my childhood, the picture of my family I had painted in my mind, suddenly felt like it was crumbling. I had always seen my parents' relationship as the standard to which I measured my own ideas of love and trust. But now, all of that felt like a lie. I know this is hard to hear. My mother's voice softened. But you deserve to know the truth. Your father made mistakes before he met me, and some of those mistakes have affected your life in ways you can't even imagine. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. My thoughts clouded with confusion. What mistakes? What happened before I was born? The questions piled on top of each other, and my mind couldn't keep up. The picture of the man I had always trusted began to blur and distort, replaced by a shadow of someone I didn't recognize. I had never imagined that my parents' pasts could have such an impact on my present. I was no longer sure what to feel. Anger, betrayal, confusion, it all mixed together in a chaotic mess. I needed answers, but I couldn't bring myself to ask. What could she possibly say next that would make sense of all this? My mother's face was full of regret, her eyes pleading with me to understand. I never wanted to hurt you, Emma, but this is something you need to know. I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say, my heart heavy with the weight of the truth. What had just been revealed had shattered my understanding of my family. Everything I had believed in, everything I had built my life around, suddenly felt uncertain. I stood there, still trying to process everything my mother had just told me. The words hung in the air like a dense fog, clouding my mind, and the room felt suddenly too small. I had always seen my father as my hero, my constant source of security and love. To hear that he had a past, one filled with mistakes and secrets that I wasn't aware of, felt like a betrayal, not from him, but from everything I thought I knew. My family's image, one that I had carefully built in my head, seemed to collapse in front of me, and I wasn't sure where to go from here. My mother was standing right in front of me, waiting for a reaction, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't form the words to ask the questions that flooded my mind. What did she mean by mistakes? What kind of choices had my father made that could affect me? The realization that there were parts of my family's history hidden from me, that I had been kept in the dark about something so significant, left me feeling vulnerable and confused. I had always been a part of the family's inner circle, but now it felt like there was a wall between me and the truth. Seeing my silence, my mother's expression softened. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said quietly, "but it's important that you understand. Your father, the man you know and love, was not always the person you think he is. He made decisions before you were born that have shaped everything in our lives. Decisions that we decided to shield you from for your own good." I shook my head, still struggling to make sense of it all. "What decisions, Mom? What kind of things are you talking about?" The words escaped me before I could stop them, desperation in my voice. I needed to understand. This wasn't just about my father's past anymore. It was about my entire childhood being based on a version of reality that was incomplete. How could I trust anything I had believed in? My mother sighed deeply, her face filled with the weight of her own burden. She clearly didn't want to tell me everything, but she knew she had to. I could see the years of guilt and fear in her eyes. She had been carrying this secret for so long, and now it was spilling out, piece by piece. "Your father, Muir, before he met me, he was involved in things he shouldn't have been. There were choices he made, things he got involved in that affected his relationships with other people, with his family, and even with his own sense of self-worth. But when he met me, he changed. He promised me he would leave that life behind, and for the most part, he did. We both agreed that the past needed to stay buried, but you're old enough now to know that nothing is ever really buried for long." I felt like the ground beneath me was shaking. The man I had always admired, the man who had given me advice, comfort, and love, had once lived a completely different life. My mind raced as I tried to connect the dots. What could be so bad that my mother felt it needed to be kept secret from me? Had he hurt people? Was there something criminal in his past? The possibilities were overwhelming. "Why now, Mom?" I asked, my voice shaking, trying to make sense of her sudden confession. "Why are you telling me this now, on my birthday of all days?" I could feel my chest tightening as I spoke. Why had she waited until now to drop this bombshell on me? Why couldn't she have told me sooner, when I was old enough to understand? My mother's eyes filled with tears, and she stepped closer to me, placing a hand on my arm. "I never wanted to burden you with this, Emma. I thought I was protecting you from something that wasn't your concern. But now, I see that you deserve to know the truth. You need to understand that everything we built as a family, everything that has made you who you are, was influenced by your father's choices, for better or for worse. And I thought it was time you knew that." I took a step back, feeling like I couldn't breathe. It was as though I had been living in a world made of glass, and now it was shattering around me. I had always believed in my family's story, in the idea of a perfect upbringing. I had never questioned my father's integrity, his love for us. Now, I was forced to see him through a different lens, a lens that was cracked, imperfect, and full of unknowns. The silence between us stretched on, thick with tension. My mother had told me the truth, but I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to confront the parts of my family's past that had been hidden from me. How could I look at my father the same way again? How could I reconcile the loving father I knew with the man my mother had just described? After what felt like an eternity, I found my voice. "What do I do now, Mom? How am I supposed to handle this? How am I supposed to look at Dad now?" My words came out in a rush, full of anger, confusion, and pain. But I was also scared. scared of what it would mean to face the truth about my family, scared of the changes this revelation would bring to my relationship with my parents. My mother's eyes softened, and she stepped toward me, pulling me into a hug. I don't have all the answers, sweetheart. I can't fix the past, but I hope you can understand that I did what I thought was best at the time. We all do what we can to protect the ones we love, even if it means carrying burdens alone. I stood there in her arms, unsure of how to move forward. The truth had been revealed, and my world had changed in an instant. But the question now was, could I accept it? Could I still see my family for who they were? Or had everything I believed in been tainted by the lies of the past? The hours following my conversation with my mother felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had told me, the weight of her words, the reality of what I had just learned settled deep in my chest, and I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. I wanted to reach out to someone, but who could I talk to? Who could understand this pain, this confusion that was tearing me apart? I loved my family, but now I wasn't sure if I even knew them. The man I had always thought of as my father, the man who had been a steady, reliable presence in my life, was not the man I thought he was. And my mother, the woman who had always been my protector, had kept such a crucial secret from me. I felt betrayed, and yet, at the same time, I couldn't blame her entirely. She had done what she thought was best at the time, but it didn't make it any easier to carry the burden of that truth now. I needed answers, and I knew where I had to go for them, straight to my father. I didn't know how to begin this conversation, but I knew I had to. The weight of the secret that my mother had kept from me now felt like a wall between me and my father, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The thought of confronting him terrified me. What if I didn't like what I heard? What if the man I had admired and respected wasn't who I thought he was? Could I ever look at him the same way again? Later that evening, as the party had finally quieted down and guests began to leave, I found my father sitting alone in the corner of the room. His face was lit softly by the dim light, and he looked at peace, almost unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I had never seen him like this before, so calm, almost detached from the excitement of the day. The reality of what my mother had revealed hit me again, and the emotions rushed back, intensifying with each passing second. I walked over to him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Dad, can we talk for a minute?" I said, my voice wavering slightly. He looked up at me, his face breaking into a soft smile. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I could tell he didn't sense the shift in the air, the heaviness that had settled in my own heart. Taking a deep breath, I sat down beside him. "It's about Mom, and what she told me." His smile faded slightly, and I saw a flicker of apprehension cross his face. "What did she tell you?" he asked, his voice suddenly more serious. He knew, even without me saying another word, that something had changed. The calm, steady man I had known for all my life was now visibly uneasy. "I know about your past," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, filling the space between us with an unspoken tension. He didn't react immediately, and for a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then he sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "Emma," he paused, gathering his thoughts. "I was hoping you wouldn't have to learn this way, but I should have told you years ago. I made mistakes, many of them, and I did things I'm not proud of, things that I thought I could leave behind when I met your mother. But we all have our pasts, and I'm no exception. I should have been honest with you." The admission hung in the air, heavy and raw. It wasn't the dramatic confession I had expected, but it was enough to send a shockwave through me. My father, my rock, the person I had always thought of as infallible, had made decisions that had directly affected my life. I wasn't sure if I was relieved to hear him admit it, or if I felt more betrayed than before. I had spent my whole life seeing him as a perfect, untouchable figure, but now I saw him as just another person, flawed and human, like everyone else. I couldn't stop the flood of emotions from taking over. What kind of mistakes, Dad? What did you do that was so bad? I asked, my voice breaking. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of his past. I needed to know everything. I wasn't always the man you knew, he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. Before I met your mother, I was involved in things that weren't good, things that affected the people around me. I wasn't proud of it, and I didn't want to bring it into our family. But the truth is, I should have been more honest with you, with your mother, and with myself. The silence that followed his words was suffocating. I could feel my father's guilt weighing heavily on him, and though I understood why he had kept his past a secret, I couldn't ignore the fact that it had been kept from me for so long. Why didn't you tell me, Dad? Why didn't you tell me the truth? I asked, my heart aching. He looked at me, his eyes full of sadness. I thought I could protect you from it, Emma. I thought keeping the past buried would be the best thing for you, but I see now that I was wrong. I should have trusted you with the truth. As the conversation continued, I realized that this wasn't just about my father's mistakes. It was about my own perception of him. The perfect image I had always carried of him was being replaced with something more complicated. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I realized that even though my father had made mistakes, I still loved him. He was human, just like the rest of us. And the past, no matter how painful, was part of who he was. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was one I had to have. The truth had been revealed, and while it had shattered my illusions about my family, it had also given me a new understanding of the complexity of relationships. My father was far from perfect, but he was still my father, and in that moment, I chose to accept the person he had become. The journey to accepting the truth about my family was just beginning, but I knew it was a necessary step to truly understanding who I was. The days following my conversation with my father were filled with a mix of reflection and quiet emotional turmoil. I found myself replaying the conversation over and over in my mind, trying to digest what I had learned and what it meant for me. The truth, though painful, had shattered the image I had of my father, but in a strange way, it also made me realize something important. My father wasn't perfect, but he was human, and the mistakes he had made, though significant, didn't diminish the love and support he had always given me. It wasn't the story I had always imagined, but it was the reality I had to face, and somehow that made it feel more real and honest. I spent a lot of time thinking about the past, the way my family had kept certain things hidden, and the way I had always believed in their version of the truth. It wasn't that my parents had meant to deceive me. They had genuinely thought they were protecting me, but in the process, they had kept me from knowing the full picture of who they were. The weight of that secrecy had been a burden on them, and now it was a burden I had to carry. One afternoon, a few days after my conversation with my father, I met up with my mother. She could see the change in me, the quiet contemplation that had replaced the carefree attitude I once carried. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, sitting down beside me. I nodded, though it didn't feel like enough of a response. There was so much more I wanted to say, but the words weren't ready. "I've been thinking," I started, my voice steady but filled with emotion, "about everything you told me, about Dad's past." And I trailed off, unsure of what to say. I didn't want to hurt her by saying what was in my heart, but I knew I had to speak the truth. "You don't have to apologize for anything," she said, her voice gentle. "I know this isn't easy, and I wish I had told you sooner, but I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept it hidden, you would never have to face the pain of it. I understand why you did it, Mom, but I can't help but feel like I've been living in a lie," I admitted, the words coming out more painfully than I expected. "I've spent my whole life thinking everything was perfect, thinking I knew who you both were, but now it feels like I don't even know what's real anymore." She nodded, her expression filled with a mixture of guilt and understanding. "I know, and I'm sorry, Emma. I never wanted you to feel that way. I wanted you to grow up with a sense of security, to believe in the family we had. But the truth is, we all have parts of our past that we're not proud of. And sometimes, those things have a way of catching up with us. The conversation with my mother was difficult, but it was also healing. I had spent so long resenting the secrets they kept from me, but now I was beginning to see the bigger picture. I was learning that no one's life is perfect. People make mistakes. Parents, even the ones who love us deeply, are flawed. And it was okay to accept that. My family wasn't perfect, but they were real, and that in itself was enough. In the days that followed, I began to rebuild my understanding of my family. The truth had been a hard pill to swallow, but it had also opened my eyes to something deeper. I realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about acceptance, forgiveness, and growth. My father's mistakes didn't erase the love he had for me, or the sacrifices he had made for our family. And my mother, though she had kept secrets, had done so out of a desire to protect me. Both of them were human, and their imperfections didn't make me love them any less. I also realized something important about myself. I had been living my life according to expectations, both my own and others. The truth about my parents had forced me to confront the reality that I, too, was allowed to make mistakes. I was allowed to be imperfect, and I was allowed to accept my past without letting it define me. I didn't have to live up to an ideal of perfection that didn't exist. The key to moving forward was not to erase the past, but to learn from it, to grow, and to embrace the complexity of life. Over time, I found peace with what had happened. It didn't happen overnight, and there were moments when I still struggled with the weight of the truth. But slowly, I started to feel a sense of relief, as if the burden of living in the shadow of an idealized family had been lifted. I began to understand that it was the imperfections, the struggles, and the honest conversations that made my family real, and in the end, that was what mattered the most. In the end, I learned that family isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about accepting the flaws and mistakes, forgiving each other, and moving forward with love. The secrets that were once hidden had revealed a truth that, though painful, had made me stronger. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I could move forward with the understanding that love, in all its complexities, was enough to bind us together.